people underestimate the power of being able to get a message out to the world in mass. It's everything one-on-one, one-on-one, one-on-one. I want to, that kind of stuff. And it's good. It's okay to hone your skills. But if you really got something to say, you don't have a lot of time to deliver it. And the bigger the audience, typically the less time you have to deliver it. So you really got to make it count.
Yeah, and a lot of people now are even doing that on YouTube videos, right? It's not just speaking on stages anymore. Like we do our YouTube channel, we get hundreds of thousands of views. Like you don't realize it, but you're still speaking to the masses.
Exactly. And the principle, if you understand some of the basic principles, they're the same in both cases, online and offline, or in video.
So I know like people's attention spans, like just in the last 5 years, right? It's unbelievable. Back in the day, you used to be able to go fill a room, spend all this money, and we could get thousands of people in the room. Now we can deliver very quickly, very succinctly, and we're going to hit 2 million views this month on our channel.
Wow!
And that's obviously it takes some work, it takes some effort, it takes some strategy, but it is amazing to me how the difference between the messaging, right? And so as you teach training and sales all over the world, I know I've been to a number of your courses. I've watched you speak hundreds of times. How are you changing to help people adapt to today's times?
Yeah, well, the big change is this, is I try to tell people that when you're speaking, it's a conversation. It's not a show. Okay. That the big distinction is you go to try to perform, you run the risk of being a not such a good performer. But if you can just have the conversation, and so the speaking style, the communication style, if it's more conversational with a lot of energy and passion in it, lands a lot better. So that has to change. And the whole algorithms for getting people to get the view to begin with, it's like on Instagram, you got a minute or less, 30 seconds or less. So you got to really make it count.
Yeah, I know one of the things that I think you might have known this, Danille and I, during COVID, we were sitting around and Andy Tanner said he had taken a comedy class online. You remember that? So Danille looked up a comedy class in Phoenix. And so we signed up. We went to 12 sessions and we did a stand-up at the end. We did it. I remember Danille stood up on stage in the first hour and she basically almost got down. The lady's like, get back up here. And basically got her comfortable. And then after we did all that work, and by the way, I did it too.
Yeah.
About a week later, you had a presentation, if you remember.
Yeah, I did. And I'm not a bad public speaker, but I get like really nervous, And I wasn't nervous at all because like to me, I had to make people laugh on stage and now I just had to like talk, So like it was almost like so much worse that this no longer felt bad. You know what I mean? So
right.
You've been doing this a long time. And I don't want to preach to the choir here, but most people come into the room, it seems to me like just using the two of us as an example, with all this baggage that we have in our head. So some of it is just clearing that out.
Yeah.
Would you
totally
agree with that? And then
yeah.
It's dropping in the right stuff.
Yeah. It's like, I teach people how to sell. It's kind of the same thing, right? Oh, they can't handle rejection or objections. They're afraid of it. The fear of it keeps them from selling, keeps them from presenting, and I just say, people say, how do you get over the rejection? And I go, you want the short answer? The short answer is face more of it. Just get rejected more often. My son, Zach, he's another whole story. He's the subject of that book's of sales strategies. 21-year-old guy runs into my office. He wants to be rich. You're right. I go, teach me how to be rich. I go, no. I said, first you got to go learn how to sell something, and there's a whole story about him. But the point is with him is what he found out was this: the more people I talk to, the more doors I knock on, the easier this gets. Until this time, he has no qualms about talking to anybody in authority, not authority, announced in there or not announced in there. And what he did is he burnt through that membrane of fear that comes. And a lot of times the fear is worse than the actual fact. So one way to do it is just like what you did, Danille, when you went back up on stage again on that comedy club, she pushed you through that membrane till you got to the other side of it. Now it's not a big deal, right?
Well, and what actually I thought was interesting in the comedy is, this was a 12-week thing, right? So you started from zero. So as we were putting together scripts, you had to go in front of the room, which was like 15 people. And then they would say, okay, so when you said this, that wasn't funny. That part wasn't, they raised their hand after that wasn't funny. And, maybe it would be funnier if you did this, or like, I didn't understand that joke. Like, what were you trying to say? So as horrifying as that sounds, maybe to somebody listening, what it actually did is you were telling other people they weren't funny. You weren't taking it personally because, like, I want to know this because if I'm going to go on stage with 100 people, better to hear it here. But you just kind of got numb to it. It wasn't, you didn't take it personally. It wasn't offensive, And like, I think when you get turned down in sales, you feel offended because they don't like you or whatever.
So right. See, and that's exactly the point. And sometimes the fear of it holds you in check for minutes, days, months, years, a lifetime, when really all you had to do was just have somebody push you through it a little bit, and you realize, hey, it's not so bad. As a matter of fact, I'm learning something right now. And that's a very big difference, and I think that I'm finding that younger people right now, like my son's age, they're 20, 22 and 27 or 29 right now. They are less affected by that negative feedback than I was, or I am sometimes. I mean, they just like, yeah, big freaking deal. Okay. So what's the point? You know what I'm saying? So I think that, I think part of it has to do, it's generational as well. I'm a boomer, right? Boomers are all about, they're like, job loyalty, all that kind of stuff, work for the boss, loyal to your company. And like, if you got negative feedback, it was traumatic. Now my kids could care less.
No, is that something, because you travel all around the world, right? So is that something that you're seeing culturally everywhere, or what kind of work ethic and cultural differences are you seeing in other countries?
Okay, well, yeah, I think work ethic has changed a lot. I think one of the things about Americans, for sure, Americans, I think, Ken, you said it earlier, are distracted really easy. I mean, they'll go to the next shiny object pretty quickly. I spent most of my time in India and East Asia, a little bit in Europe, a little bit in South America. But in those countries, it's very, very different. Why? Is because they're kind of emerging out of a rural economy, but it's coupled with a digital economy. So, now they have instant access to information. When I went to the workplace, 1980, I think the literacy rate in the world in 1980 was like 68%. Now, in those countries, it's over 90%. So access to information's immediate. And so what happens is, I think this younger generation is kind of jumping the game into, I see a lot more entrepreneurship, see a lot more people taking chances, taking risks. So their work ethic's very different. They really want to learn. They really want to learn. I'd say in all the countries, Vietnam is probably the as far as entrepreneurship goes, this group of people, and I go there several times a year, only as a country apply information immediately. I mean, they're hungry. I mean, they'll stay up all night studying. They have no problem working 24/7. That's kind of where they come from. Here, not here. I need my time off. I want my time. Here, time is more important than the money. Over there, the learning is more important than anything else, because it's still, education is kind of a ticket to making money, to getting out of the rat race.
Well, I was going to say, do you think that that's just different in let's use Vietnam for an example, because they're coming from poorer backgrounds, but they see an opportunity to not be poor with this global economy?
The idea of school as school is relevant to them because they need to have the education they needed as a ticket. They got that. But the real education that they're getting is online. And I know that my business and the training and coaching business and people that I'm training over there is booming in India. I mean, we're talking about multi-billion-dollar business because people are just bypassing the system to get the education they want. Everything from health to finance to entrepreneurship to parenting, all of this stuff. And they're just flocking by the thousands into these rooms and online programs to learn this information.
Because so they're not really going to their schools through their school system there?
No, they're doing the school thing because they have to do the school thing. Okay. And part of that is also like in India, they have families that are like, they call them joint families. So you have multiple generations all living together, right? And you have the in-laws living with them too. So the motivation is pretty big because the young people don't like that. They want to be entrepreneurs so they can get the heck out of there and get their own places. And they don't want to suffer the same lifestyle that their parents did, which was poor. So there's big motivation for lots of different reasons.
So I was going to ask, it's one of the things that the school system, we'll call it, the current educational system had was decentralization, right? The non-ability to access more, right? Because it was like, this is what you're going to study and this is all we're going to study. And there was nowhere else to go back in the day. It started with, I guess, the encyclopedias, and then it kind of grew from there. But now we have this internet. So we've gone from decentralization to really centralization, or I guess the global economy is what Danille just said, right? So everything's global now. And I know you're crushing it, right? So you're now flying all over the world with these. The one thing that is universal is sales training and selling, right? Like if you can't sell, doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what country, what age, right? So it's one of those niches that, and also we should probably say in a lot of places, people don't necessarily look at sales that nicely, right? They're like, oh, it's, kind of a nasty business or whatever. But I will tell you, once you figure out like subtle little ways to sell and to get whatever it is across the goal line, even marriage or dating or a business or a loan or starting a company or whatever it might be, or a promotion, it all has this basic building block that is not taught in the school system, right?
No, not even close. As a matter of fact, inadvertently, school systems teaching you the opposite. They're teaching you that mistakes are bad. When in sales, you make as many mistakes as you can to figure out what works. That's what marketing is all about, right? So yeah, school system not only does not teach it, but it gives you the message to still, unfortunately, be good, do as you're told, kind of an old baby boomer mentality, and you'll get taken care of in the long run. And I'm going to say that in Asia, India, Vietnam, well, not all of Asia because I'm not familiar with all of it, but in Thailand and Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, these places, these guys are bypassing very, very quickly. That's why the GDP of Vietnam, I think it was last year, was growing at a faster rate than China. And that's been true for about the last 8 years. They're called the Asian miracle. They're just continue to crunch it. And they're still in, theoretically, manufacturing. So I think that
part of what I wanted to ask you was, as you're flying around in all these cool places all over the world, and you're seeing these economies right now, like really moving the needle, right? All over the place, because the one thing that we're always will look for, even though we might bitch about it, is we're going to look to buy something for the least amount that we can, right? Whether it's a suit or an iPhone or a suitcase or whatever we want it to be, right? Like people, and the biggest component of that is access to labor, right? So as you're flying around, you're seeing this firsthand.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and again, obviously in India, the price that you can command for a given commodity for a laptop, for example, is not going to be the same price in India as it is in the United States. I mean, they have to charge less money because they got over 1.2 billion people in that country, and most of them are poor. You know, there's a lot of people with a lot of money, but one thing that everybody knows, very different than in the US, one thing everybody knows, education. And I'm not going to say what kind of education, but they say education is the ticket to get out of poverty. Okay. And they're all literate now. They can all read and write. They all have access to the internet. So there's nothing stopping anybody from getting the information they want. Now, on the personal development side, that's not available on the internet unless you find somebody like you or me, right? But the point is that they are voraciously taking this stuff on, and I think that I think that the if you look at literacy rates of the younger are always greater than the older, right? Which makes sense. And so as that workforce comes up, it's going to become more difficult for employers to offer value to their employees because most of them it used to be you work for the boss. As we go, each generation since then is become more and more entrepreneurial. You know, till the point is, there's a lot of people, a lot of kids, or younger people right now, they have this gig, that gig, this side hustle, that side hustle. They could care less about going to get a job in a big company for sure. And to go into an office, forget it. Their trust level of authority has gone down, not up.
And you're seeing that in the US too, or mainly overseas?
Yeah, you see it a lot you see it a lot here. But what I'm saying is they couple that work on the farm and the rice paddy, hard work ethic with this.
I see.
In America, they've got all that, but they don't have the same got to get it done. I need it because I need it for my family. I need it to survive. I need it to grow. So that's the difference.
Well, here, I mean, I know that, here though, the poor in this country live much better than the poor in other countries though, right? I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a hard life here. I'm just saying it's, here you provide basic necessities. Like when we were in Bali and we were talking to our driver over COVID, they cut off all their tourism, which is their main way to make money. And he said, people were starving in the streets because the government wasn't sending checks or anything like that. It's like, you got to figure it out. And, to your point, like, that's just how it is. I mean, they're here, you can get a job and you can live okay. There, if you get a job, you're much better off, trying to move up the ladder.
Well, yeah. There a lot of guys, like I say, have bypassed the get the job thing, and what they're doing is, I got a business partner over there, never made it through high school, and he trains trainers how to teach digitally online, and he created his own platform. He was a sound geek, he worked soundboards at events, and now he's got 38,000 paid subscribers on his network, that are loving it all, and they're learning from each other, and they're creating all education systems that bypass the traditional school systems. I mean, like I said, I think that what I see a big leap in the workforce. I see that those places combine the hard work ethic with the digital economy are going to crush it.
Well, and plus, the cost of living over there is so cheap. I know our family we know in Bali, it's $100 a month for rent. So, I mean, what can they do online to make $100 a month? It wouldn't be that hard if they had the knowledge and the language to be able to sell to even Americans, Australians, Europeans. I mean, you could make $100 a month or $100 in 5 hours easily. I mean, that does make a difference.
That's right.
I was going to ask, Blair, as you're obviously, I'm sure, when you live in America, you think all eyes are on America, but it's not true. Like,
Well, right now they are.
Well, right now they are. Yeah.
Right now, all eyes are on America.
Why?
So, I can't imagine why.
I do want to talk about this a little bit because, as I've traveled a lot in many of these areas with you, with Kiyosaki. We just got back from a quite a big trip in Germany and the UK, and we were in Paris, and And when there's these, I guess over here we're talking about capitalism, socialism, and all these different kinds of things and different kinds of governments. And but what's been interesting is no matter what political power is happening, there seems to be like these entrepreneurs kind of creep up. People figure out whatever system they're in, they figure it out, right? Like so, and there's a lot of emphasis on our system when it's not really. I always tell people like whatever, like who's ever in power next will do what they're doing, and then I'll just have to adapt, right? Isn't that pretty much how the whole world reacts?
Oh yeah. I mean, sometimes you think they're delusional. Like I spent a lot of time in Taiwan. So everybody always asks me, how do Taiwanese feel about the Chinese? And I'm going, if you ask the average Taiwan business guy, they go, yeah, they're there. Big deal. It's like, because to your point, Ken, it's kind of like we just operate as entrepreneurs. We just operate with what's what's on the table and find out what opportunity is there. Okay. And if it changes, then we got to change again. Somebody that's got a corporate job or somebody that's dependent upon somebody else for their paycheck doesn't have that flexibility. So they have both have insecurities. Okay. One has the insecurity of a job. The other has an insecurity of making a bad decision. Either way, you got to face it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're going and training, because obviously you and I talk a lot, what's kind of the new thing? Like I know you were trying to teach people how to present and get the power, kind of like what Danille was talking about with the taxi driver in Bali. Like, how does somebody like that all of a sudden, reach out and do something bigger when they don't know how?
That's a great question. First of all, I think you got to have an idea of what other people want and to have some kind of a rapport with them. It's not so much, excuse me, it's not so much about selling. It's about finding out what people want and then helping them create a pathway to get there or help them get it. And so, and just through the process of the years, and Robert and I both found this out in the very beginning, way back when, before all this stuff, that there was a lot more leverage in talking one to many than trying to talk one to one. I mean, and that was our strategy, is that when he was selling for Xerox and I was selling for Unisys, we were the only first ones that were doing little mini seminars to bring people in and to sell to them. And it just grew from there. Now it's become very, very popular. But people don't understand that some of the basics, like you said, in sales, the basics of communicating, the basics of talking to people where it counts, people forget about all that. And so some people you'll see, like, you guys are blowing it up on social media. You guys are blowing it up wherever you go. Why? Because you have that, you come as a sales guy first, and then you went one to many. Big difference.
Yeah.
Big difference, because you know how to read a room. And I would maintain that you also know how to read an economy. You can read a group of people. You can see a deal, see things in deals that other people don't see. So for that taxi driver, what do people want that he can help them with? What do they want that he can help them with? And then he can just start broadcasting, learn how to broadcast, learn how to get with social media. Anybody can do it. And that's the problem. Anybody can do it. So now you're facing a blizzard. How do you make yourself different? How do you do it in steps? So it's changed a lot since the days of knocking on doors.
But also, I think people don't understand about the time involved in the process and the lag. Like there's lag. So like when Danille and I first started, I don't know if you know the whole story. It was during COVID. And of course everyone was home and I started the YouTube channel and I, all that training and all that, the stage time and all that travel around with you and Robert and all those things and all the stuff, listening to all of you and me doing some of my stuff, all of that, all lined up right then, because then I just took all of that and put it up on this paper, in the middle of COVID, and we stuck it up on YouTube, and those videos went viral because of all that knowledge and all that training and all that, all that self-doubt and all the things that happened, up to that point.
Right.
And then what happened was, we didn't quite know how to do YouTube or how to manage YouTube or why one video did great, why one didn't. The point is that we just started, and then we just were super aware and looking at the data and said, okay, how do we get better at this? And how do we get better at that? It's just like even this podcast, one of Danille's goals for 2025 is to make this podcast even better than it was last year. It's a good goal. So she has benchmarks and things that she studied. I don't think people realize it. First you just got to start, and then you just always have to be reflective and continually be open-minded just to adjust, right?
Yeah, you said it. You just got to keep going, which is the basics of entrepreneurship. I had there was a little expression. What my first sales job with Unisys before that they were Burroughs. There was a sign on the wall that says salesmanship begins when the customer says no, right? And so I always thought that was about handling objections. But what you're talking about is what it's really about. Is when the customer says no, you feel, oh man, I can't do this. This is not worth it. It's going to take too much time. That's when you got to start selling to yourself. That's the number one sell. You got to sell you on not giving up. You got to keep going. Keep going, because what you guys just described and you just demonstrated is kind of, I used to call it the last man standing. You're still going. Everybody else is falling away, and now you're king of the hill right now. See, so that's what happens as entrepreneurs if you keep your ethics in and all that stuff, of course, and you have something of value. But yeah, you just keep going, keep correcting. And sometimes it's discouraging. But, sometimes if you got nothing to lose, like that taxi driver's got nothing to lose, he's good to go. He could be doing Instagram reels and all kinds of stuff for a while. Something goes viral and he's off to the races, and he can figure out that maybe there's something better for me to do than drive a taxi cab right now.
Well, and I think that, social media is kind of the new door knocking, right? I mean, there's still people that door knock, but, we get a lot of people that ask us about starting a podcast or starting a YouTube and how much work it is and, whatever. And I just met with a girl last week and I said, well, on your first video, like you might be lucky and get 5 to 10 views. You know what I mean? And she's kind of like horrified, like, well, what? That I go, yeah, like when you start, you'll probably get 5 or 10 views, but then maybe the next one you get 8 or 15 views or, but it's like everyone wants to get 10,000 views or 1,000 views. And it's like, it takes a lot. You have to have a video that goes viral, and that's probably not going to happen until your 50th video, right? So like, you just have to have that expectation, because so many people, they start, they get 5 views and they're done. They're like, nope, that's just
done.
out,
Yeah. Yeah. That's the problem. And that's not just true on video. That's true in life. That's true in everything. We know that, one of my late great mentor, Mac Newton, 2-time world champion Taekwondo, he said this, he goes, quitting can never be your first option. Quitting can never be your first option. And when you think you don't have anything else in the tank to give, what he used to say, he says, when you think you're dead, you're done, you're only 50% of the way there. He says, that's when you got to dig deep and find something inside. And that's what makes the difference.
Yeah. You trade people all over the world. And so you stand in front of, I don't know how many people a year, maybe in the 100,000 plus.
Yeah, all told, probably something like that.
Yeah, a year. I mean, that's significant. And so here you are, looking at the people, looking at the room, watching the room, reading the room. What is it that makes one person on one side of the room not take action, not do anything, versus somebody that does, because that's always been a frustration when there are people that just come to those seminars and they don't do anything. Right. There are others that take action immediately. So what is it? What's that one thing that you can land on somebody that says, just do this?
Well, that's a great question. If I knew the answer to that, I would only select people in the room that had that trait.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know the exact answer to that, but I would say the first thing is, how bad do you want it? So these days when I do webinars, sometimes, right in the very beginning, I go, look, if you're not interested in really taking this on after a little bit of an introduction, if you're not interested in taking this on and really going for this, you can just click off now. I mean, it's fine. You don't need to be here, because I think that, first of all, you got to really want something pretty badly. The other thing is who do you hang around with? That's the biggest thing. And for some in Asia, one of the biggest detriments, I shouldn't be saying this, but one of the biggest detriments are people's families. What are you doing? You're supposed to be an engineer. Go finish your education. You don't be an entrepreneur. And they're living in that joint household, right? And so the pressure is really big. It's who you hang around with. Here, it's more of your friends that you're hanging around with. They're like poking fingers at you and saying, what are you doing that? You're a clown. You don't deserve it. And I think that who you hang around with is probably one of the biggest issues as to whether somebody's going to take it on or not.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just like, why are you doing that? Even if they're like, hey, this weekend, do you want to, go to this party? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Or you have other friends. I mean, some of, my stepkids' friends, it's like they spend all weekend like pursuing leads and going to seminars. And it's like, so even if they're not poking at you, if they're not really offering any value that's moving you forward and you to them, then it's going to hinder you.
That's right. That's right. Well said.
And they always say your net worth is your network. And like the older you get, the more you kind of realize that.
That's right. And I think that it's like we said earlier, it's easier now than ever before to do it. Easier now than ever before.
I think the other thing that I realized now, just reflecting back, is my life lessons are not much different than anybody else that I might be walking by or sitting next to at any given time at any restaurant or event or anything like that. It's really not. It's now, certainly there are people that are going through worse things and certainly people that aren't. But at the end of the day, life's lessons just keep coming in waves. They just keep hitting the beach. And my experience has been that how and what you do with that, like it could ruin your day. It can, if you elevate it and turn it into something bigger, then it's that is a choice. And I think that so for me, I put like really, really big things into a bucket, and that would be family and health, let's say. Everything else is kind of inconsequential. And I think it's funny. It took me a long time to figure this out. So, and part of that is just fine tuning and honing in. Like I asked Blair, I knew exactly where he was when I saw where he is, because I've been where you are. I've sat in that exact chair. You're at the ranch in Texas, and they're doing a deep dive on personal development, right?
That's
even at our ages.
That's right.
I don't think people realize that it never stops. When you leave the ranch, I don't know how long you've been there. What, maybe 4 or 5 days?
No, I've only been here 2 days. I'll be here till Saturday.
Okay, yeah, but when you leave, you'll be just a little bit different.
That's right. That's the point. Always, yeah. There's some people, you guys, that I think that just want to get better. And I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but there's just some people that want to get better. And there's some people that are looking to figure out how they can quit doing anything and just kick back and do nothing. And I just say that that's really never been a part of my makeup. I mean, I work out with a trainer. Typically 5 days a week, and he works my butt off, and it's like I'm climbing Kilimanjaro my 14th time this summer. It's like, why? And I think that if you're the type of a person that really just wants to get better and realizes, as Mac Newton said, there's way more in there that you have not yet experienced, that you have not brought to the surface, and that excites you, or even maybe pisses you off a little bit, say, I want to get to that, and I want to see what I can do, then you'll be successful. You'll be a lifelong learner, and you'll just keep going. And I think that's when I was talking about East Asia. That's what's sitting over there. That's what's going on with those guys. In India, they're very spiritually based. So when they say when the waves, you talk about the big waves that come and hit you, from that for them, they understand when I talk to them, I said, so why did that happen? They go, it's obviously a lesson for me to learn. I mean, right out of the gate, I don't have to convince them of that. That's part of the culture. This is something for me to learn. It's going to make me better. And I'm going to thank my gods or whatever for this. And I'm going to get better as a result of that. And, that ethic is here, but not at that massive level of a population. And I think that what you said, Ken, is really important. I think that if you want to get better, if that's something that you want to do, then you just keep going. You just don't stop. I was getting real worked up about that.
So I wanted to touch on rejection, right? Because even if people aren't in sales, they get rejected, right? Whether it's a date, a job, an interview, whatever.
What are you talking about? Who's got rejected on a date?
So how do you avoid this feeling of rejection, or how do you cope with it is probably a better question.
Okay. Well, it's kind of what I said earlier. Face more of it. I mean, the more of it you get and the faster you get it, the faster you get over it. Because really all it is, it's a shock to your system because you don't like hearing it. But after you've been here, if I said to you, you're an idiot, you might be offended. If I said you're an idiot again, you might get upset. If I said you're an idiot about 10 times right in a row, after a while, you just start laughing, go, this is ridiculous. And that's what happens because your mind is so wound up to be perfect or whatever it is that the minute somebody challenges or shatters it, you, oh my God, I'm going to go. But it really doesn't happen that way. And so how do you handle rejection? You handle a lot of it. Do you handle it in live? No. When I teach salespeople, I tell them to drill it. Practice objection handling with each other again and again and again and again and again. With Zach, the part of the outcome of that is I told him, go get a job in sales. So he got a job in Austin, Texas, selling water door to door in low rent areas of Austin, Texas. You talk about in the middle of the day when nobody's there. I mean, you talk about difficult, right? And so I said, get your guys to practice objection handling. And they did. And they would get together every morning, back and forth, yelling at each other, insulting the crap out of each other. Then they go out and sell. And he had one of the highest performing teams in the whole system because you just practice it for real or even in role play. So that's another way of handling it.
But don't you want to also know, ask questions to know why you're rejected? Isn't that important?
That's important if you've got the sanity of the mind to ask the question. But a lot of times what happens is your emotion goes up, your intelligence goes down, and your brain freezes. Is like, right? And so and then people kind of walk away. But yeah, I mean, that's how you actually handle an objection. Is like somebody says, you have no idea what you're talking about. You acknowledge them, you say, thank you. Why would you say that? So you immediately come back with a question. So that is the response if you can get to that place. And you just keep asking questions till you find out what they want, what their real thing is, and then you can turn it around for them.
Well, you can also learn, from that, right? Like if you're on, let's go back to dating. If you're on a bad date and the girl says, I'm not into you, you could try to figure out why versus getting offended.
Danille, is that it is the number one fear of every human being. Is to be rejected by your peers, to be rejected in public. All of that stuff is its core because we are connection-based creatures. We crave and need and want the connection at some level. And when somebody tells you you're full of it or I don't like you or you're ugly, it's like, oh my God, right? And so again, you just got to learn. And then after a while, you can learn to not take it so personal.
So Blair, I know you just got back from a big trip and now you're at the ranch and you're writing another book, but let's talk about the one that's out here, the sales strategies for everyone. Obviously this just hit this month. Yeah. Congratulations. Writing a book is not easy. What's in it and where can people find it?
Well, the book was written, I wrote a book years ago called Sales Dogs, and it was a bestseller for a long time. But this book, I realized that it had some good strategies in it, but I wanted to write a book that was easy So a kid getting out of high school right now, or in your 20s, early 30s, you want to be able to go out there and be an entrepreneur, or to learn how to sell and generate income, because sales equals income. Make it really, really simple. So it's the story, as I mentioned, of Zach, my youngest son, running in my room, say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be rich. I go, first, go learn how to sell. And so it's the lessons I taught him over the course of several months that really made a big difference for him, is how he has no fear of selling. He's done very, very well in every sales position that he's had. He hasn't had that many, just a few, but it's very, very powerful. And in it, there's a lot of role plays, because I'm big on role plays. So, okay, so if somebody gives you a rejection like this, here are the questions. Ask this question, this question, this question, this question, this question, this question. So there are templates in there. There's probably about 10 of them in there. So if somebody says this, you do this, 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 and this. And if they say that, do this, 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 and this, to make it really, really easy, really simple. So, because you know what? I still believe, sales equals income. It is, no matter what the economy does, your ability to control your income is paramount. And that's the way to do it. And that's why I wanted to make it real simple. Yeah. So if you want the book, go to kmpress.com.
Awesome, Blair.
Blair,
Thank you so much for having